What up, YouTube? Here with a post-fight video of the Junto Nakatani versus Petch Salapat fight. Now, before I give you the summary of what happened in the fight, I'm going to tell y'all the results first. Junto Nakatani was successful in his defense of his WBC Bantamweight title. Ever since winning the WBC Bantamweight title, I don't know how many wins that he's consecutively won via knockout, but ever since becoming champion, I believe he's won 4 straight consecutive victories via knockout. And this was yet another emphatic, impressive performance on the part of Junto Nakatani. He did that versus a veteran in Petch Salapat. Salapat, prior to this fight, he had the record of 72-1, a veteran in Salapat, and for Nakatani to dominate the fight that he did, the way he did versus Salapat, was more than impressive, because prior to the stoppage, I had this bout scored a shutout for Nakatani. And the way how Nakatani performed, he did a brilliant job, and he showed that he's not only a devastating power puncher, but he is also a skillful fighter that possesses very talented fundamentals. And Nakatani proved that in not only this fight, but in previous fights as well. Nakatani, he is good at reading the distance. Nakatani is good at keeping his opponents at bay. Nakatani is good at throwing the jab out there. He's very patient, he's accurate, and he's very good at placing his punches and timing his opponents. And when he times his opponents, that's how he sets up his opponents to knock his opponents out, which Nakatani has made a reputation out of, because Nakatani, he is a knockout artist. And what makes him so dangerous is that not only is he unbeaten, not only is he a devastating power puncher, but Nakatani is a very methodical power puncher that likes to sit and bait his opponents in. And he did that in this fight by waiting for Salapat to want to exchange with him. And Nakatani, he is, as I said, very good at establishing that jab and reading the range and distance that he wants the fight to be fought at, proving that he is a very skillful fighter when it comes to ring generalship. And Nakatani, what he does very well is when his opponents get close in range with him, he likes to throw that uppercut and short lead southpaw right hooks. And he's, as I have mentioned before, very accurate and very good at placing his punches and timing his attacks. And that's what makes Nakatani so dangerous. And Nakatani, as I said, he's accurate. And when his opponents are in close proximity, he likes to throw his uppercuts and hooks relentlessly. And he's accurate. And with the power that Nakatani carries, he tends to devastate and hurt his opponents very effectively. And the way how this fight was fought, Nakatani was very patient with his opponent in Salapat, and he made this a chess match versus Salapat. And the way how Nakatani fights is he likes to adapt with his opponents, and he respected Salapat's experience and the veteran in Salapat. As I have said, 73 previous fights that Salapat has had before stepping in there with Nakatani, and Nakatani showing that respect that he had for Salapat's experience, show that Nakatani is a very smart, very brilliant fighter. And the style that Nakatani has is also of a very smart fighter. As I have mentioned before, he is a methodical fighter, and with the attributes that Nakatani displays so very well, those are attributes of a very smart fighter. And a lot of power punchers such as Nakatani, who's made a reputation of knocking out his opponents, do not tend to carry the fundamental skills that Nakatani has displayed very thoroughly throughout many of his fights. And the fact that Nakatani is a very young, fresh, in prime fighter makes him just that much more better. And this goes to show that Nakatani has a bright future ahead of him. And he still has a lot of potential to be a possible top 5 pound for pound fighter in all of boxing, because in my top 10 pound for pound best fighters in boxing as of today, Nakatani is for sure on that top 10 pound for pound rankings. And with Nakatani being the most experienced, the most reputable gained fighter, and better yet, champion at the Bantamweight division, and with the Bantamweight division not having a current unified champion, makes it a interesting of a scene at the Bantamweight division right now. And I can say Nakatani, this was perhaps his most impressive win. And we know that Nakatani made his reputation and his splash onto the relevancy of the boxing world after his emphatic knockout win over Maloney. And then he won 3 consecutive fights after that following his knockout victory over Maloney, including this knockout win over Salapat. And after Inoue was defeated for his WBA Bantamweight title, I'm talking about Naoya Inoue's brother, Takuma Inoue, who lost his WBA Bantamweight title in a upset decision loss to Seiya Tusumi, who's also unbeaten, doesn't have as much experience as Inoue or Nakatani, but after his hard-fought, well-deserved victory over on Inoue this past weekend, that makes him the WBA Bantamweight champion. And then there's also the WBO Bantamweight champion, who's also unbeaten and is out of Japan. All 4 champions in the Bantamweight division right now are Japanese, and they're all unbeaten. And the current WBO Bantamweight champion defeated Jason Maloney to win the WBO Bantamweight title. And then in his first defense of the WBO Bantamweight title, he defeated the number 1 ranked WBO contender in Daigo Higa in what was yet another hard-fought decision win. And the current WBO Bantamweight champion is a unbeaten fighter by the name of Yoshihide Takei. And he made his reputation more in kickboxing. He made a recent splash onto the Bantamweight championship scene in boxing after defeating Jason Maloney to become WBO Bantamweight champion. And then he defeated, as I said, Daigo Higa, who was ranked number 1 according to the WBO. And he won back-to-back decision wins versus more experienced boxers and who's been fighting at a elite level in the Bantamweight division for a longer period of time than he has. And he is undefeated, as I have said. All the champions in the Bantamweight division are unbeaten as of right now. But other than Junto Nakatani, we have this man who's the current WBO Bantamweight champion, Yoshihide Takei, who, as I mentioned before, only has had 10 fights, unbeaten still, like all other champions in the Bantamweight division. Then Seiya Tusumi, he's also unbeaten. He's only had, I believe, 9 or 10 bouts as well. And then the IBF Bantamweight champion, also unbeaten, and that undefeated IBF Bantamweight champion is Ryosuke Nishida, who won that title back in May of this year when he defeated Emmanuel Rodriguez via decision. And he also isn't as much experienced as other champions in the sport, like the other two champions in the bantamweight division I had mentioned outside of Nakatani. Nishida has less than 10 bouts. He's only had 9 bouts so far. This goes to show how green the bantamweight division is right now. And other than Nakatani, who is the household most recognizable name in the bantamweight division, in Japan, much like England or Mexico or Puerto Rico, has a very healthy, lively, and now Saudi Arabia as well. Saudi Arabia has got a huge market when it comes to the sport of boxing as well. But when it comes to local, domestic boxing, Japan or England or Mexico has a crown right now when it comes to local support for the sport of boxing. And ever since Naoya Inoue moved up to super bantamweight to become undisputed after conquering all of bantamweight boxing, Junto Nakatani has taken over as the face of bantamweight boxing. And Nakatani is the most experienced champion at bantamweight, and I can confidently say that Nakatani is the most experienced top fighter at bantamweight amongst the elites at bantamweight. And when Takuma Inoue was the WBA bantamweight champion, Nakatani was still more experienced than Inoue. Nakatani's had 25 fights before fighting Salapat. Inoue has 22 fights on his record, and that makes Nakatani more experienced than Inoue. And to be honest, if Nakatani and Inoue were to have a title unification bout, if Inoue did not lose to Seiya Tatsumi this past weekend, Nakatani would have still been the favorite to come out victorious over on Inoue if they were to have a title unification bout. And truthfully speaking, all the other champions that I had mentioned in the bantamweight division is not on the same level, is not in the same league as Nakatani. And I say that with all due respect. This is just me being honest. And Nakatani right now, I don't see nobody in the bantamweight division that could defeat him with the current streak that Nakatani's on and the power that Nakatani has. And also, as I have said, Nakatani is very skillful. He is a difficult fighter for any of his opponents to come out victorious over against him. And I think Nakatani is gonna be undisputed at bantamweight, and I just don't see any fighter, any opponent that could dethrone Nakatani as the best bantamweight in bantamweight boxing. There's veterans like Jerwin Ancanas and Joel Casimiro. In his most recent fight, moved up to super bantamweight. He was a former champion at bantamweight. He was the only one, in my opinion, that could have gave somewhat of trouble to Naoya Inoue when they were both competing at bantamweight. Now that they're both fighting at super bantamweight, if Casimiro gets his ranks back up to where he was at bantamweight when he was the champion at bantamweight, at super bantamweight, he could still possess that threat to Naoya Inoue's undisputed super bantamweight title once he gets enough victories under his belt to earn himself a title shot at the undisputed super bantamweight champion, that being Naoya Inoue. And then there's Emmanuel Rodriguez. I don't know if Nonito Donaire is still active, if he hasn't retired yet. But fighters such as Nonito Donaire, Yerwin Ancanas, Emmanuel Rodriguez, and who else competed in that boxing tournament back in the days for the undisputed or unified bantamweight titles that Naoya Inoue won in the finals after defeating Nonito Donaire. I mean, those guys that I have mentioned are out of their primes now, and it should be a cakewalk for Nakatani. And whoever Nakatani does decide to fight for his next fight is going to be a good local support, as it always is for Nakatani. And if I go look at the current rankings that the WBC has for the bantamweight division, the number one ranked contender, according to the WBC in the bantamweight division, is a undefeated fighter. His record is 29-0. David Contreras. He is a Mexican fighter, and if you compare Junto Nakatani to David Contreras, side by side, they have similar experience. Nakatani has 26 fights. Contreras has 29 fights. It's the fact that Nakatani has more of a reputation because he's a champion and he's been collecting more emphatic wins in more important, relevant fights. But it'll still be a good fight. Now, I don't know too much about Contreras. I haven't been tapping in to Contreras' fights locally out there in Mexico, but when it comes to the lighter weight classes, they tend to be more active, more aggressive, and they work more off of volumes. And how Mexican fighters typically fight, especially in lighter weight classes, they tend to be more aggressive, more of a pressure fighter, more of a volume puncher type of style that Mexican fighters tend to fight in, hence why there's a synonymous style called Mexican style when it comes to this sport of boxing. They tend to be more aggressive. They tend to be more work rate based fighters that like to pursue the action. And the way how Nakatani fights, you could tell he's becoming more reserved and he likes to wait on his opponents. That's why it would be a good stylistical fight for Nakatani if he were to fight the number one ranked contender, that being David Contreras. And there would be a battle between two unbeaten fighters. And we saw how Nakatani handled a veteran fighter who only had one defeat prior to Salapat losing to Nakatani this past weekend. And Nakatani looked more like the veteran than the veteran being Salapat. That's why Nakatani, I could put him up against any fighter and I could bet on Nakatani to come out on top. And then there's also Jason Maloney, the brother of Andrew Maloney, who Nakatani knocked out to earn himself that reputation, but that was for the WBO bantamweight title. And unfortunately, because of politics, Nakatani had to vacate that WBO bantamweight title. And Jason Maloney is ranked highly by the WBC, and I'm quite sure Maloney would like to get in there with Nakatani after what Nakatani did to Andrew Maloney, or Jason Maloney, and I think, as I have said, Nakatani, if I put him up against any top fighter in the bantamweight division, I would bet on Nakatani to defeat them. And I think currently the best fight for Nakatani right now is either a title unification bout, and that would be me speaking on the promotional side of things. Marketably speaking, if you have a all-Japanese bout for a unified title in Japan, that would be a sellout event out there in Japan. And then the most intriguing bout would be versus Contreras, because on paper, Contreras is the most comparable fighter that is worthy enough to challenge the king of the bantamweight division, that being Junto Nakatani. And with that being said, that does it for this post-fight video, y'all. Subscribe to this channel if y'all want, and if y'all enjoy this content, hit the like button, hit the share button, and if y'all want to follow me on other social media platforms, links are in the description to my Instagram and my Twitter. And if y'all want to go further and beyond to support this channel, y'all could hit the links in the description to donate to this channel if y'all want. It would be very much appreciated. And that's it, y'all. Be good and peace.